Welcome to the PsyD Webinar. I'm Bradley Cipher, and I'm the Doctoral Programs Admissions Advisor here at Divine Mercy University. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by rising second-year doctoral student Nathan Martin. And as per usual, with today's webinar, I'll begin by interviewing Nathan to talk about his experience here at Divine Mercy, and his backgrounds and his interests in psychology more broadly. Before that, and then I will move into the slideshow part of the presentation where we'll talk about the program in more detail. If you have any questions at any point, either during the interview or during the PowerPoint presentation, please lodge your questions in the chat box, and we will attend to those at the end. So we'll field all the questions at the end of the presentation. So there's that. Also in the chat box, I've listed my email, my Calendly link. So if you want to get in touch with me, I'm always happy to speak to prospective doctoral students in psychology. Please email me, set up a time to meet with me in the Calendly, and I'd be happy to speak with you. Okay, with that, Nathan, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Good. So let's get right into it and talk about your backgrounds and how you became interested in clinical psychology.
Sure. So I studied at Franciscan University. I don't have a very interesting story about how I got into psychology. It was just a gen psych program that got me into psychology as a whole. I started as a computer science major. And then I kind of solidified my interest in clinical psych whenever I took an abnormal class and an introduction to counseling. I kind of knew that was kind of my call.
Okay. And so then why did you choose Divine Mercy?
Yeah, so I was actually in a 4+1 at Franciscan in a counseling program. And I kind of learned through dialoguing with those professors and those doctors that I really enjoyed testing. And so I started asking around to all the psychologists, like where would be a good place to go to. And it was almost unanimously just Divine Mercy was a common denominator in anybody that I asked. And so I looked into it and I found a lot of kind of similar interest from all the doctors and just applied and thought, wow, this is a great program. So
yeah. So 4+1 counseling means that you have a master's in counseling. Is that right?
So my first year of the master's would have been my senior year. So they start it's a 2-year program and they let you take master's level courses your senior year, so that a master's is only technically 1 year. And I ended up leaving the program because I was accepted at a DMU. It was the only program that it was either DMU or it was going to be the master's of counseling. So it's just like an advantage that they give to their students that are clinical psych majors.
Oh, okay. That sounds really, convenient and good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you went right from Franciscan to DMU.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I completed about a year of the master's, got married in the summer, and then moved here.
That's great. Awesome. Okay. So thus far, what would you say would be sort of like the most, on the one hand, the most rewarding and enjoyable aspects of Divine Mercy, and maybe we'll speak to what's the most challenging and most difficult part of the program so far for you?
I would say the most rewarding, I knew from the moment of orientation, was going to be the teachers. They are such good people and absolute experts in their field. So approachable. I think it's like 4-to-1, the ratio of, perhaps I'm wrong about that, but very, very easy to get in contact with, develop a relationship. And their teaching styles are all varied, so it's a little bit something for everyone. So definitely the most rewarding was getting to know all the professors so far. The most challenging, it's probably just been the workload. It can be an adjustment to come into DMU from something that's just like an undergrad, because it really does elevate it. And as a whole, I think I had more of a research background, so the clinical work was a little bit of an adjustment for me. But that's also been very rewarding despite it being difficult.
Okay, good. So, I mean, despite clinical things being somewhat new to you, would you say that maybe you've adjusted well and you've come to enjoy the clinical dimension?
Absolutely. Yeah. There was a steep learning curve for me, but it's now one of my favorite parts. It's very hard to get into the role play mindset. We have to do a lot of role plays of our techniques just in practice before you can start seeing clients. But it's very fruitful, very helpful. All the teachers give you very detailed feedback on how to improve, but also on what you did well. So they don't hurt your self-image or hurt your self-esteem by too much negative feedback, but they throw in stuff that you've done well too.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not as if you're going at this like by yourself, it's like for example, when I tell people that we have our students move into clinical practice and they start to see clients in the second year, sometimes that can be sort of alarming to people. But really, I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is that, you're in good hands, right? So like the faculty are very much there for you. They're supportive, they're helpful. And I imagine you guys conduct sort of postmortems on sessions with clients. Is that true?
I don't know what that means. What does that mean?
So after you have a session and they consider, like, it's recorded, and then you say, like, this went really well. Like, I think that what you said here was spot on. Maybe you could have mentioned, they mentioned X, Y, and Z. Then maybe that you could you might have drawn that out, that kind of thing. You may things that maybe you missed, stuff like that.
Yeah, we do that extensively. We do that both with the teachers, with the TAs, because we normally have at least 1 to 2 teachers, teaching assistants that are either second years, third years, fourth years, which they're awesome, very helpful too. And then we talk to the person that was role playing as the client, that just their experience, whether they thought that we were tuning well, or whether we thought that we did the technique.
That's cool. That's really neat. So it sounds like you've got both like the professors that supervise, but also the advanced or the doctoral students that are further along the program. They're also part of the sort of mentoring process.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Awesome. All right. So to your mind, and for the good of everybody listening, what would you say would be some really good reasons to commence doctoral studies with us, to apply to DMU, and maybe some less good reasons, some maybe things that are maybe less helpful?
Yeah, I think pursuing doctorate should stem from a desire to help others. I think that's a good reason. I don't think it should be like a generic. I think it should be specific to mental health. I think you should have discerned out of like being a doctor or a medical doctor or being a nurse or things like that. So I'd say wanting to help people, and also because there's such a need in society, wanting to fill that gap. Because mental health resources are so scarce that we need a lot more. And I think just responding to that call is a good reason. Some negative reasons, probably money is not a very good reason. You probably won't be very attentive to your clients. A lot in ethics we talk about with the money, how you have to get a good wage, but you also should be doing some pro bono work just because of how scarce mental health resources are. And then prestige, yeah, just wanting to have a doctor behind your name is not a very good reason to go through a 5-year program.
Sure. Good. I like what you said, right at the outset there about people, the sense, because it's sort of like when people apply to, say, medical school or something like this in psychology, we can use the verbiage of wanting to help people in a very broad sense. But I mean, of course, you can help people in all types of ways. I mean, regardless of your vocation or your profession, whatever that may be. I mean, there's myriad of ways, right? But what you said I liked was the specific way of helping others in this particular capacity. Being a clinical psychologist to sort of ameliorate people's psychological and emotional distress, and just really kind of help them to lead flourishing lives. And then, of course, money and prestige are probably not the best reasons for wanting to do this kind of work, right? Okay, good. So then, sort of related to this business about good and bad reasons, maybe what types of people do you think would flourish here at Divine Mercy, and maybe what types of persons would have a really hard time and probably struggle?
Yeah, I think the people that are very interested in integration, not just Catholic integration, because we have professors that are Christian or other,
Mhm.
I don't know exactly the denomination, but so I would say just a general interest in integration would be very helpful. And also, if you're only focused on the clinical side, I think that's perfectly fine. I know a lot of people get afraid of like a dissertation or the research aspect, but our professors are very good at breaking it down into very manageable steps, so that even if you have no research background, which some of my classmates did, you're able to grow and be able to do that work eventually. And then what was the other question?
Okay, so folks that would flourish, that would succeed and thrive, and then folks that would probably have a harder time.
Yeah, so those that are clinical work, I think they would flourish, and also ones that are integration, but those that might not thrive, I would say if you're solely research focused,
Mm,
you wouldn't do too well here, because a lot of everything is tied back to the clinical work. Even when we're reading research journals, we're always tying it back. Okay, how can we help? How can this help us with clients? So I'd say the researchers probably aren't very fit for this program.
yeah, that well said. I mean, 'cause that's a common question, that for people thinking about PsyD, what's the difference between a PhD program and a PsyD program? And I mean, that's, I think, kind of cutting to the chase is what you just mentioned. Namely, it's like if you're really sure, like right from the outset, that you want to be a researcher, and you're less interested in the clinical side of things, you probably are better suited for a PhD, versus a PsyD, where, like you say, like even despite the fact that there is certainly an in-depth element of research and the theory of psychology, um, that there's a way in which there's a constant effort to return to how do you apply this knowledge in a clinical setting.
Yeah, and kind of in a gray area is teaching,
Okay.
because now like the PsyD profession is gaining more respect as becoming teachers, because there's kind of been a shift that they want their psychology professors to also be practicing and teaching.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that somebody that wants to teach shouldn't come here. I think that's kind of it's like almost like a risk, I guess, because you can teach with a PsyD. It's just not the best path if you only want to teach, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know. I think that does. I mean, so I tell prospective students, it's like, well, if you want to teach, at, say, even at a university, it's like the PsyD certainly could avail you that opportunity. But like you say, if you're pretty sure that you just want to be if you just want to be a professor or a teacher, then I think that what you said is spot on. It's like this is probably not. I mean, you might be, again, better served doing the PhD.
Yeah.
Good. All right. So in your view, what, especially for people that are, that they're not sure whether they should, and so rather than the PhD versus PsyD, they're more considering masters in counseling versus PsyD in clinical psychology. So for those folks, what would you say would be some of the major differences between counseling and clinical psychology?
Yeah. I would say the scope of the things that we deal with. Typically with like counselors, they only, not say only, but they have a greater ability to work with people that are just struggling with like depression and anxiety, or the less psychopathology, not abnormal psychology things. So we have a greater scope that we can treat. And a lot of times we'll work in hospitals where they'll work in more like private practice or clinics and schools. So I think we treat a broader range of mental health disorders. And then also, I think leadership. This is also kind of like the team or the teaching thing, where we're not necessarily bound to leadership, or, if you do a master's, you're not going to be a leader. But I think having that doctorate does give you a little bit of an edge to be a leader in fields. So I'd say those are my two, or I guess another big one would be testing. Testing, that's kind of the biggest one. I almost, even though it was last. The master's clinicians are not able to do testing unless they're supervised. And I think that's by state law too. So what separates psychologists even from psychiatrists and counselors is our ability to test individuals.
Yeah, with psychiatrists, I mean, are they, I mean, clearly I know it depends on the state, right? I mean, some states, allow psychologists to just prescribe medications. But is it the case that psychiatrists, for the most part, can't test? Is that true?
I don't know about can't. I don't think that they are trained to do it. They might have to seek additional training, whereas we get it just through our education, just through our program requirements. I'm not sure. I've never heard of a psychiatrist doing much testing or any testing.
Or maybe if they can, maybe they shouldn't.
Yeah, that could be.
It's like maybe you might have the license to do it, but where was your training focused? And it sounds like within psychology, I mean, that's really the hallmark, right? And that clearly, I mean, is such a bedrock, foundational, essential element to our program here is the testing element. Okay, good. So what would you say? I mean, I know that you've sort of only been here a year at this point, but what would you say maybe 2 or 3 most formative ideas that you've encountered at Divine Mercy that has been especially impactful for your thinking as a budding psychologist and a clinician?
Yeah, so one of the first things that they kind of orient you to was the common factors approach to therapy, and that the relationship is the most important. I think it takes up like 40% of the effectiveness of an intervention. I think only what intervention you do is only 15%, whereas just how good of a relationship the therapist and client have accounts for 40% of the change. And I've really come to appreciate that. At first, I was kind of skeptical, but now I've really started to see how the relationship is one of the most key aspects, and that's very much formed me as a clinician. And then I think on the more research side, anxiety and how the perception of your own anxiety can change how your body responds to it. We learned this in cognition and emotion, which is the summer class in the first year. And just by changing your perception of anxiety as a bad thing to a good thing that gives your body energy can change how dilated your blood vessels become, and it can enhance performance rather than inhibit. And I found that to be very, very helpful. So I think those are my 2 big ones.
So would you say that, would you say that this business of the perception of anxiety is related to the idea that emotion, like there aren't necessarily like good and bad emotions, right? So I mean, anxiety, sorrow, depression, anger, all these things have places in, like they're part of our psyche for a reason. Like they have a functional aspect to them, rather than thinking of emotion as like, okay, so sadness is bad and fear is bad and joy is good and things like that.
Yeah, I think in our CCMP classes, they teach us that emotions are messengers. They're not good or bad. It's kind of how you respond to them that can be good or bad. And I think with the anxiety, it can be either like a message of doom, like, oh no, something big's coming, or it can be interpreted as an excitement. I know we read studies where CEOs are more likely to judge their anxiousness as excitement rather than as something that's nervous. So.
So, I mean, in a clinical setting, would maybe the purpose be to help the clients manage these emotions in such a way that they're directed toward the good, right? And so that in a similar way that you described with the CEO.
I think it's actually very helpful. It's a technique called cognitive restructuring. And with clients, we can help if they're interested in building virtue, we can help them restructure their feelings of impatience as opportunities for the virtue of patience. That when it's at the height of their feelings where they want to lash out, that's actually when the virtue is most likely to flourish and grow, and they're going to develop a new habit. So just by restructuring, instead of seeing the impatience as an obstacle, like I never want to be impatient, see that as an invitation, or see it as an opportunity to grow in the virtue.
Well said, very well said. So we speak a great deal here at Divine Mercy about what we call the meta model of human person, right? So understanding man in light of what the church has taught about the human person for 2,000 years. That man is, body and soul, spirit and matter, hylomorphic union. So it's good to talk about these things, like like you had said, that there's certainly a theoretical component to our curriculum, but certainly it doesn't stop there. The work in Psy.D, we're constantly thinking of how do we apply this to clients, to patients, how do we help them lead a better lives in light of this knowledge. So maybe could you marshal a couple examples of how exactly these sort of, you maybe call them theoretical ideas, might be applied in a therapeutic setting?
Sure. So I think there's like an implicit form that they're implied, and also an explicit. With the implicit, I don't know if I'm sure you're very familiar with the meta model, but our viewers might not be. There's different premises of the person, and the first three are created, fallen, and redeemed. And I think those just implicitly help you to always view the client with dignity, respect, but also hope that they are redeemed, that they can get better, that they're resilient. Then kind of a more explicit way that we use it, in the classroom, we had to actually develop our own form of an intake, where we developed questions based off of every area that the model covers with clients, where we would ask them their questions, and we would try to gain as much information about the various aspects of their life, which kind of leads me to the next way that we use it, which is case conceptualization. It is second to none to be able to get a full grasp on somebody's life. If somebody comes in with like OCD, you might, does it impact your work? Well, no. Okay, well, then you never ask anything about that, but they may be struggling to flourish in their work without the OCD impacting it, or they may not even know that they're not flourishing in it. It helps you assess areas that you may otherwise have missed.
Help me understand that. I'm not sure if I was tracking with the OCD example. So that you might notice the presence of OCD, and it doesn't impact one's work, perhaps, but once you kind of probe into that question, you discover that, or you might help the client to see that there are other ways in which the OCD is in fact impacting their life. Is that right?
No, because we could just help them with their OCD and never address the other aspects of their life that aren't flourishing. That makes sense. So we could just use cognitive behavioral therapy. We deal with their obsessions and their compulsions, their behaviors go down, and then they're no longer diagnosable as having obsessive compulsive disorder. But through probing with the meta model, we could see that, they're not really flourishing in their relationships very much, or their work, they don't find fulfillment in their work. And then we can help with that because we've asked those questions.
Okay, yeah. So let me just make sure that I'm understanding. I like what you said, because it reminds me. I was actually reading the meta model last night, and it speaks to the non-reductive approach that we take at DMC, right? And the way you just described that sounds a lot like that, because you zoomed out from, okay, so there's maybe some element of OCD, but really let's take a look at the broader picture. How is this person, how are their relationships, the context in which the person find themselves, and what virtues are relevant to the whole person, and if we can kind of attend to the multi-layered faceted element of that person, they have a better chance of healing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they teach it very well, because they teach mental health resources are very scarce, so we need to be very efficient and effective with our time. I was actually attended a webinar that said charity is effective intervention, and mercy is efficient, effective intervention. And so we have to be merciful in that we quickly alleviate suffering, but we don't, hold somebody in therapy longer than they should be. And they teach us very well how to balance that. Approach.
Yeah, that almost sounds like, I mean, do you guys get into that in your ethics class about, right? I mean, just like as a physician wouldn't treat a healthy person, right? It's like, or at least medicate a healthy person. So too, it sounds like by analogy, a psychologist would, the whole point is to get them to lead a healthy life apart from intervention. Is that fair?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what we're trying to do. We don't want somebody to be in therapy for years and years and years. We want them to get in and as quickly as possible get out and be flourishing.
Well said. Okay, good. Okay, now for those listening who are married or they want to get married soon, please speak. I mean, you're a married person. Please speak to your own experience being married in the program, and how manageable or maybe unmanageable it is.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely manageable. In fact, it can be a help. I think, just to have somebody to talk to, obviously not about clinical work, but about your studies. And I think it's good to have friendships because this is a program in DC. So I had to move away from all my family. So it's nice to have somebody that's not in the program be a really close friend. There are some difficulties, as with everything, living with alone would still be a difficulty. My first child was born in finals week. So that was quite difficult to get through, but the professors were very lenient. They helped, they extended. So one, I guess, advice would be to, I can't remember the name of it. It's like filed for an incomplete, and that gives you an extra 30 days to get things done, which in my case would have been very helpful.
Sure. Excellent. All right. Well said, Nathan. At this point, let's transition to the slideshows. So bear with me for just a sec. So this is the overview of the doctoral program in clinical psychology at Divine Mercy University. Divine Mercy is a Catholic graduate school of psychology founded in 1999 as the Institute of the Psychological Sciences, dedicated to the scientific study of psychology with a Catholic Christian understanding of the person, marriage, and family. Its expansion from IPS to DMU occurred in 2016 to facilitate growth and add a counseling program at the graduate level. So Divine Mercy is one institution. It does have two distinct schools, however. The School of Counseling offers a master's of science and counseling. It's chiefly an online program, though our counseling students do come to campus sort of episodically for clinical hours. We also have the Institute of Psychological Sciences, which houses our residential doctorate, which is what we're talking about today, as well as a Master in Science in Psychology, which is an entirely online program. So our mission is to provide students with an effective academic and educational environment that supports the integration of the psychological sciences and a Catholic Christian understanding of the person through teaching and learning both knowledge and critical skills. But also to assist students intellectually and professionally as they prepare themselves to respond to their vocation as mental health professionals or as men and women in helping professions. So before long, Nathan, this will be you. All right, we're located outside of Washington, DC, in Sterling, Virginia, which is in Northern Virginia, of course. It's truly, granted, I'm actually a native of this area, and so I'm somewhat biased and partial, but I must say that it is a great place to live and work and study. It offers, if you enjoy city life, we certainly have that to the east, and if you enjoy more outdoorsy things, hiking, whitewater rafting, canoeing, that's certainly on offer as well, given that, for example, the Appalachian Trail runs through the western part of the states. So that's certainly on offer. We offer also, well, I should say, we have a number of accreditations. We're institutionally accredited by SACS, the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. SACS is recognized as an accreditation agency by the Department of Education, and DMU voluntarily participated in this accreditation process, meeting or exceeding all standards and thorough evaluation. We're also approved to operate by SHEV, the State Council of Higher Education in Virginia, And the Psy.D program has been recognized since 2006 as a national research destination program by the Association of State and Professional Psychology Boards. And perhaps most notably of all is that we've been accredited by the APA, the American Psychological Association, since 2016. Finally, DMU has been approved to participate in the National Council for State Authorization and Reciprocity Agreement. So we have basically every accreditation possible. Like Nathan had mentioned, there are a number of different types of clinicians that conduct psychotherapy, but really a key differentiating element of psychology and clinical psychology is the ability to test. So providing more, you might say, precise diagnosis for clients in the process of healing. It is a 5-year program, so 122 credit hours all told. This does include a Master of Science, a Master of Psychology degree after the first 2 years of successful coursework, en route to the doctoral degree, which is 2 for the master's and an additional 3 for the doctorate, a total of 5 years, with the whole purpose of preparing you to become licensed as a clinical psychologist. The first 2 years feature the main task, you might say, is the core courses in psychology, the core science courses, but also attending those are integrative studies courses, which are usually team taught by a philosopher / theologian and a clinical psychologist. Now, in year 1, there is often some sort of beginning research or foray into your dissertation topic. But in year 2, the main shift is that students start to see their clients here on our on-campus clinic at Divine Mercy. And as Nathan mentioned, they receive faculty supervision as well as assistance from doctoral students who are further along the line. Now, in years 3 and 4, similar to medical school, students spend less time in coursework and a lot more time in the clinic. Now, that said, a lot of their clinical time is spent off campus on a local site. That's very often they're supervised by other clinical psychologists that are not DMU faculty. Now, in year 5, this is the internship year. So the internship is again, similar to a medical student that would apply to residency, a psychology student would apply to an internship, okay? These internships are sort of dispersed throughout the country, and students apply to internships depending on their own particular academic and clinical interests, depending on what they are and where they'd like to go. Now, if you want to stay local, let's say that you wanted to remain in the DC area, for example, we do have a number of sites that many of our students have attended locally. For example, the St. Elizabeth's Hospital in DC, the Psychiatric Hospital of Washington, and Virginia Medical Center. Now, dating back to 2017, 2018, we had 85 of our students matched into an APA accredited site, but at this point here we are in 23, we have had 100% placements, into APA accredited internship sites, and I believe we had 100% placement the year before that, and something like 98% in the year before that. So chances of folks getting into a really good APA accredited internship is extremely high. So in light of all this, Nathan, do you have anything that I missed that you think is salient and important for people to know?
No, well, I think we got the KCREP accreditation too just recently. I think that was pretty big. Yeah, the APA accredited match rate is stellar for this university. That was a factor that I took into consideration before I applied. So those 2 things I think are what I would say.
Good, yeah. I mean, agreed, of course. All right, this slide offers a overview of the curriculum in PsyD, as I say, lots of courses in the first and second year, as Nathan could attest. Now, the other thing to notice is that this is a full year program. So it's not just in person, it's that you're going to have things going on both in the fall and the spring and the summer, right? So for example, here in the summer between years 1 and 2, they start off the summer with developmental psych, cognition, emotion, and they shifted into their orientation for the clinic. So in order to prepare them to begin that here in the second year. You might also see that a lot of the program overall has been pre-prescribed. There's not a whole lot of elective, though you may notice here in the spring of year 3 and then in the spring of year 4, there is a little bit of wiggle room for it to choose between courses. But the reality of this program is that because it is APA credit, there's simply a swath of courses that's simply the material which must be learned for for licensure. And then people take their comprehensive exams for the Psy.D comp exam, usually late in year 3, between year 3 and year 4. And then after that, it's lots of dissertation writing, and then the internship is in year 5. Okay, these are a few questions of discernment, in terms of whether or not this is a good fit for you. So, do you want to help people flourish? Are you interested in science behind human behavior? Do you want to become an instrument of healing through the psychological sciences? Are you interested in performing psychological tests and assessments, diagnose your clients, and create a treatment plan? And are you looking to start a career as a licensed mental health professional and specifically as a clinical psychologist? And finally, do you have the ability and desire to work with all types of clients, from acute care to more challenging long-term client cases? So if you're thinking, yes, then this is probably a good fit for you. Okay, these are the major areas of competency that we do aim to inculcate in all of our students over their time here. Foundations in psychological science and research, integrity and practice, assessment and diagnosis, therapeutic intervention, professional roles, and then clinical practice from a Catholic and integrative perspective. I'll go ahead and unpack each of these here. So foundations in psychological science and research. Graduates will attain foundational psychological science knowledge of biological, cognitive, affective, social, and developmental aspects of the human person, as well as history and systems of psychology, psychological measurement, research design, and statistical method. Graduates have the skills necessary to conduct their own psychological research. 2 is integrity and practice. Graduates be knowledgeable in the areas of diversity and ethics and display critical thinking, self-aware and reflective practice, and self-care. Graduates will demonstrate responsiveness to supervision, collegiality, and professional performance in professional practice. 3 is assessment and diagnosis. Graduates will be able to conduct clinical interviewing, perform intake evaluation, demonstrate knowledge in the administration, scoring, and interpretation of psychological assessments, integrate multiple sources of test data and clinical interview information into written reports, diagnose, and develop a treatment plan. 4 is therapeutic intervention. Graduates will be able to demonstrate case conceptualization, treatment planning, building and maintaining a therapeutic relationship, psychotherapy skills, crisis management of urgent social circumstances, and discharge planning. All right, 5, professionals. Graduates will be able to function a variety of required roles of professional psychologists, to include consultants, educator, supervisor, practice manager, and program evaluator. They'll be able to work collaboratively within disciplinary teams and with clients. 6, clinical practice from a Catholic and integrative perspective. Graduates will develop a Catholic understanding of human flourishing in the individual person and marriage and family life, and be able to integrate this with psychological sciences in clinical practice. Okay, so Divine Mercy's program in clinical psychology is, you might say that it avails to people all kinds of opportunities, right? Because psychology is a massively diverse field, but really, to kind of, in the interest of time, I want to simply reiterate the notion that this is the core, you might say, purpose of the Psy.D is to get people licensed as clinical psychologists. But apart from that, many of our graduates find themselves in a number of different settings. So for example, psychiatric hospitals, military establishments, private practices, outpatient clinics, diocesan consultation, or working in a clinical facility. I would say, for those that are unfamiliar with this term, diocesan consultation, what this means is that a lot of time, well, some of our graduates will go on to do consulting for a diocese, say, in the capacity of conducting psychological tests for incoming seminarians to evaluate people's capacity to become future priests, things of this nature. So like Nathan had mentioned, the scope that clinical psychology offers people is rather broad and wide-ranging. So it really does open the door to a lot of really fantastic opportunities that simple that people with merely masters simply won't have. So it's a good reason if this is attractive, especially the testing element is attractive to you, then the Psy.D is probably the best bet. So we've had really legions of students come through our school and enjoy a great deal of success here and move on to flourish in the world of professional psychology. These are some of many testimonials. So James Baldwin has said, in our clinical psychology program, the training is focused on healing the whole person. Kristen Long, I was drawn to the PsyD program and desired to serve others in a more profound way than my previous positions offered. Timothy White, the school is not afraid to teach you what it means to be human at every level, psychologically, philosophically, and theologically. That's why I like it. And then Kirsten Curtis, I'm so thankful for DMU. The faculty members are very supportive, and I received lots of hands-on and clinical experience. This is a video testimonial from one of our current doctoral students, William Johnston, who's done work with PTSD and combat veterans.
Hi, my name is William Johnston, and I'm a PsyD student at Divine Mercy University, currently approaching the end of my third year in the program. Military service runs in my family, and so both my grandparents served, my parents both served. This door, the PsyD program at Divine Mercy University, opened that opportunity for me to continue to give back, to conduct research, and hopefully implement a more robust program to treat PTSD as it relates to combat veterans. DMU has certainly provided the integration that I've sought in terms of my formation, both the philosophy and theology core, in addition to the psychology curriculum, has provided me growth in terms of my faith and my role as a husband and father, and of course, a psychological clinician. So in essence, the Catholic Christian meta model of the human person is why I'm here, both for my own sake as well as the sake of my future clients.
Okay. We have yet another video testimonial. This is from a recently graduated alumna.
I would say that being a student at Divine Mercy University, or DMU, is one of the best things that happens to me. I really appreciate the great support from faculty members and also classmates. I have gained a great deal of knowledge in all aspects of clinical practice, research, and also professional development. DMU not only provides students with strong academic skills, but also prepares them for a career in psychology. I personally benefit from mentorship with academic advisor and clinical supervisors. As a person, what I most appreciate from DMU is that its mission helped broaden my perspectives in understanding a human person through the lens of Catholicism. Catholic principles, especially in hope, love, and faith, are very valuable and certainly helped me become a better clinician.
All right, very good. Okay, so here at TMU, we offer a generalist program in psychology, which means that students get exposed to every major field within psychology, everything from social and personality psychology to child and developmental psychology, research and statistics, and everything in between. These are a few. Oh, I should also add that our doctoral students are educated in all the major schools of psychotherapy, everything from CBT to psychodynamic therapy, EFT, DBT, humanistic strengths-based psychotherapy, IFS. So it really runs the gamut. These are a few of many of our professors. Dr. Lisa Klucke is our IPS dean and program director here in the PsyD program. She's a specialist in assessment and therapy. Dr. Graves is a child psychologist primarily. She's also the assistant program director. Dr. Oriana is our director of clinical training. These three gentlemen here at the bottom were amongst the founding faculty at Divine Mercy University back in the late 90s. So Dr. Strafani is a specialist in CBT and group therapy, Dr. Nordling in child, marriage, and family. And Dr. Bitz's work is really located at the nexus between Catholic theology and modern psychology. And a lot of his work has been very seminal in both in the development of psychology more broadly, but also, of course, in the foundation of our own school. All right, in terms of licensing, is licensing required? Yes, certainly. To practice, a licensure is required where one might practice as a clinical psychologist. When does this happen? Licensing begins after the student officially graduates from DMU. So in other words, getting the Psy.D does not immediately confer licensure, right? So states can often do have additional and different requirements depending on what that state may be. And really the responsibility is for the student to understand this and then sort of figure this out earlier on in the program if possible. Also, DMU will certainly also help students in, with information related to licensure as well. So yes, like I said, who initiates it is a student-driven process. So it's important that students be on top of that. And then finally, will students be fully licensed after graduation? No, graduates must work about a year in a supervised environment, in addition to other state requirements to be licensed. And the graduate may be required to obtain a provisional license during this year period. So be sure to check your state for individual requirements. Okay, these two graphs depict a distinction that I like to draw between in buying something that's simply material, like say a car. It's like you buy the car and then the value of that car is going to rapidly diminish in the years after its purchase. Contrast that for a moment with investing in yourself, investing in your mind and your soul through education, but not just any education, an education that is of massive demand today. I think as Nathan had averted this reality earlier when he said that, you know, how precious little mental health clinicians are sort of in our culture at large, and people's ability to access them. This is a rarity. Okay, and so for that reason, in light of that, in concert with the fact that there's so much mental health issues in modernity. I mean, we're so rife with addiction and depression and anxiety, among other issues, that your services as a mental health provider, and specifically with the broad range of services that you'll be able to offer as a clinical psychologist, means that this is an investment that's going to pay itself forward over the course of your career, which could be decades in length. Okay, now as to the investment itself, it is $1,170 per credit for 122 credits. Over 5 years, it's $142,740. That does not include fees or indirect expenses such as housing, gas, food, things of this nature. Now most of our students do obtain some federal student aid, and the FAFSA form does begin, or at least it opens up October 1st. So in terms of if you're thinking of applying, that would be something to kind of keep in mind. Now, all that said, we do offer a number of ways of defraying the costs. So for example, we offer work-study programs here on campus. A number of Psy.D students work with me and my colleagues here in admissions. Others work in the business office, for example, and this of course helps to defray the cost. We also offer discounts for Catholic students that are able to provide evidence that they're a parishioner in good standing at a parish. Often this discount, I think, is about 15% off. Moreover, we have a number of different scholarships to which people are able to apply. They pay out typically up to the amount indicated here to the right. And each of these scholarships attend different demographics, and so I would certainly encourage you to take a look at them on our website, divinemercy.edu/financial aid. So you can apply to up to 4 of these scholarships and receive 2 of them. Also, I should mention we have merit scholarships ranging from half off of tuition to a quarter off of tuition. And these are typically doled out to students of especially distinguished academic and also interpersonal merit. So I would say generally to get these, you'll probably need something like a 3.5 or higher GPA. And also, of course, the GRE is considered as well, but also how one fares in the interview process when they come to campus interview is extremely important in not just in admissions to the school, but in obtaining these merit scholarships as well. Oh, and one more thing I should mention is that we do also offer an early admission scholarship of $3,000, which I'll describe more in a minute when we talk about the interview process itself. Now, in terms of entrance requirements, we do require at least a baccalaureate degree from a regionally accredited school. We do prefer that people have studied psychology, but that's not by any means necessary. We admit many students that don't have any formal psychology backgrounds, and they do just fine. So, for example, for those students that have never studied psychology, we often require them to complete a prerequisite class that's completed online concurrently with the other coursework over year one. Really, what this class is an undergraduate course in general psychology that's spread out over 2 semesters. So it's a very manageable thing. I believe it was recently taught by Dr. Rebecca Morse. Now we also need typically a 3.0 or higher GPA. For those of you who don't have quite a 3.0, maybe you have like a 2.7, 2.8, 2.9. If you're in the vicinity, let me know. It might not be an insuperable obstacle. We have admitted people that have had less than a 3.0 in the past, so just bear not, just talk to me and we can see what we can do with it. Now, in terms of the application process itself, the thing to do is to first apply online. As I will sketch out in a subsequent slide, there are basically 2 phases to the admissions process, is the way I would describe it. The first one includes the online submission, and that's a fairly easy form that can be submitted rather rapidly. It is available on our websites. If you go to divinemercy.edu, and there's a little button on the top right-hand corner that says apply. If you smash that, it will open up the different applications. Anyway, so once the online application is submitted, our financial aid office will get in touch with you, and we do thereafter maintain communication until all the other elements of the document are received. And at which point, if the application is approved by our dean, then you'll come to campus for an interview. And typically you'll hear back with a decision, usually just a few weeks thereafter. So for example, we have 3 different admissions interviews per academic cycle. The first one is interview on November 10th. Okay, so this is the one that I mentioned earlier, features the early admissions scholarship. And this is provided that you get all of your application materials in prior to October 25th, and also provided that not all the slots are filled at that point, and you get a spot, you are eligible for the $3,000 off of your first year's tuition, with the final provision that you are, of course, admitted into the school. Okay, so for that reason, if all this is making sense to you, and you're serious, I would say that take action. That's maybe my biggest piece of advice, because this is simply our most popular interview of the year because of the tuition, the partial tuition remission, and also that we tend, on average, I would say, dole out most of the merit scholarships in this first interview here. So, because of its popularity, because of these unique financial offerings, I would highly encourage you to take action before all the slots get filled up. Okay, because I've received lots of applications, and many of the slots have already been filled, and more of them are going to be filled. So please don't drag your feet. Take action. Apply. Talk to me. If you need more information, I can certainly provide it for you. But that would be my advice to you. Okay, to review, like I say with part 1, the online application can be found on our website. is very easy, and it does require a $55 fee. Now, but once that's been submitted, so the online part one is complete, then you want to turn to the other elements, which are as follows. So the essays, there are 2 essays that you'll need to write. One will ask about why you want to become a clinical psychologist and why you want to study here at Divine Mercy. The second will ask about your academic and clinical interests in psychology. We will also require a resume, of course, an updated professional resume, and 3 recommendations. Now, we do prefer that 2 of these recommendations on your behalf come from academics, so professors. They don't need to be the psychology professors, say that you studied chemistry, for example. I mean, they could be chemistry professors, it's quite all right. Now, for those, and then the third ordinarily is a work supervisor, a recommendation from a work supervisor that can speak to your work ethic and how you've done as a professional under their supervision. Now, if you are in the category of people that have been out of school for many years and you're really kind of out of touch with your professors that you had when you were undergraduate, that's okay. We have students that have come to us in basically all ages, really. So that's not a problem, but you might want to consider getting recommendations from 3 of them from work supervisors. So you have more work experience to pull from, and you would want to choose work supervisors. But what we don't want, though, are personal letters from family members or friends or spiritual directors or therapists. We want people who have observed you in a professional capacity. Okay, and then of course your transcripts from all your post-secondary education. So if you've gone to graduate school, we need undergraduate and graduate. If you've simply done college, then we want that, and that will suffice. Finally, the GRE is required for application. The thing to say about the GRE, a couple things. First of all, while required, I would not say that it's the most important element of your application. So while our faculty do consider it, there are, as the slide indicates, probably 6 or 7 different other things that they're looking at, including the interview itself. So when you come to campus, how you conduct yourself, how you fare in the interview is extremely impactful for the decision. Whereas the GRE is somewhat less consequential. However, the GRE can be more relevant, especially if you're gunning for a merit scholarship, in which case sometimes the faculty will use this as a tiebreaker. For example, if all things being equal, they might want to look at the GRE and see how that distinguishes people. But all that to say with the GRE, I know that for many it is a cause of anxiety, and it very often can and does prevent people from finishing their applications. So don't let that be you, right? So if this is something that you really want, and you want it for all the right reasons, like, please don't let the GRE get in the way of you fulfilling your life's dreams, for crying out loud. It's much better to take the GRE and get it done rather than protract the process and endlessly study for it, and maybe take it when it's too late and the cycle's over and then you have to wait an entirely other year. So don't let that be you. Take action, sign up for the GRE, and just get it done. All right, if you are an international student, meaning you have a baccalaureate degree from an institution besides the United States, please note that this will very often need to be transcribed through a transcription service such as NASIS. And what you want to do is go to west.org to have this course-by-course evaluation completed. If it is a degree outside the United States, like I mentioned, it needs to be at the equivalent of at least an American baccalaureate bachelor's degree. If it isn't English, it will need to be transcribed or translated into English. And of course, this cost is your own. And finally, if you would, in your estimation, if English is not your primary language, you will need to take the TOEFL test or the IELTS academic test. We do require a TOEFL test of at least 100 out of 120 to be accepted into an interview. So who do I have in mind? So if you would say that English is not spoken, it's not what you usually use in your professional and your personal life, then yes, English would be not your primary language. This is distinct from having English as your first language or your native language. That's not what's being mentioned here. Okay, this is important. Say that you grew up in any country where English is not the primary language, or it's not spoken. Let's say your native language is Spanish, for example. But now it's like you grew up in a Hispanic speaking country, but you're an American citizen now, and you are fluent in English, you have degrees in English, you speak English on a regular basis, both with your friends and family and in your workplace. We would regard that person as having English as their primary language, in which case they would not need to take the TOEFL. Okay, so if you have other questions about whether or not you qualify, whether English qualifies as your primary language or not, please talk to me, because of course the TOEFL is another thing that would need to be done, and one that, like the GRE, in my experience, often holds people up in the process, and if that's needless, then that would be, well, it would just take more time. Okay, so with that, I will conclude that part of it. Now it looks like we do have a question, so I'm going to take a look at our chat box here. All right, Candace, can we complete this degree online and receive the scholarship? I'm afraid not, Candace. This is a entirely in-person program. Now that said, we do have a number of other programs at Divine Mercy that are online. So for example, well, in fact, all the other ones are online. So if you're interested in spiritual direction, that's online. Our MSP, our Master of Science in Psychology, is exclusively online as well. And then our counseling program, that's mostly online, though of course there are some elements that were required to come to campus for clinical hours. So I hope that answers that question. It also looks like that's it. Okay, you guys are easy. Nathan, any concluding remarks from you?
No, just I procrastinated and didn't get that early scholarship, so go ahead and do that. And then only last thing I'd say is about the course schedule.
Mhm.
They give you a lot of time in between your summer and your second year fall to do the clinical work, and so that has been invaluable to have just all of your time dedicated to starting to see clients. It greatly reduces the stress.
Yeah, I imagine so. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like like that slide that I showed where it had like the layout of the curriculum, that everything is kind of really well organized, and so they're rather understanding and flexible of the time that they need to complete things.
Yeah, they are.
Excellent. Okay, Nathan, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you everyone for joining us. I wish you all well, and I hope to hear from many of you soon. Take care and God bless. Bye-bye.
Thank you.